Hey gang, number one Marmaduke fan here, and these are my first impressions of Blood Realm, written and illustrated by Robert Geronimo, lettering by Thomas Maurer. This is incredible. You got to get on this series. So I actually am not a big fan of super dark, edgy content. I've made fun of like totally metal stuff before. This is actually metal and gets me excited for it, purely based on Robert Geronimo's understanding of composition and really dynamic use of black and white. This is great dark fantasy. These are two different stories from within the same universe. So Dark Covenant is kind of like the first one and follows like the main. I don't know if either of these are the main story, but this kind of tells you a story about three mysterious silent sisters who are trying to prevent a evil artifact from falling into the hands of a evil goat general. And I've read the first two issues of that. I'm going to get the third issue because I want to know what happens. And then Shadowed Kingdom follows a unit of like the goat soldiers who have been sent on a side mission to explore something, and then while they're there, they discover something sort of dark and sinister about it. So, what's interesting about the world of Blood Realm is there's multiple factions. It has a history with interesting things and evil, lords in the past who were conquered. It reminds me very clearly of the feel of Lord of the Rings, where it doesn't have the tone of Lord of the Rings. It's a much darker tone, but it has the feel of Lord of the Rings in that I'm getting swept into this world and I'm getting interested in its history. But as a comic, it's giving me this in a beautiful, condensed format. So it's not, thousands and thousands of pages of dull, economic world building, but it is it's economical use of world building in that it's presenting me the cool facts briefly, through characters talking about it, and it just gets me into it. So the composition, what Geronimo likes to do is solid black, solid white, solid red, textured use of like little scratches and details in the black to give everything this sort of abstract, pulsing, creepy, energetic feeling, and then really inventive composition. So there are a few ways to think about comic panels, like the classic, Scrooge McDuck way was like panel, 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 panel. And that's really elegant and simple. It's straightforward. It gets the job done. A lot of really beautiful artists would do like gorgeous illustrations using that panel, 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 panel thing. And you just get into the rhythm of things and enjoy the illustration. Kind of Will Eisner's generation, he would write about, how to use panels creatively to kind of like, break things out or not use panel at all, or have the characters break out of the panels. And this was a revolution, and you could kind of see this revolution creeping across artists across generations. I think manga took that idea and pushed it to the limit by having like diagonals and lots of vertical, like the Japanese language is read vertically, so they could put a lot of vertical elements into things. And that becomes more of thinking about the page as a painting rather than each individual panel as a painting. Now, my favorite is when you can master both. You master the individual panel and composing each individual panel, and you master the page. So what Geronimo likes is, I think Geronimo loves thinking about each page as an individual work of art and a complete composition. Therefore, every single page reads like a big splash page. Or even if he does use panels, it's like it's 1, 2, 3, they kind of work together really well, red, white, red, or it's a big single page that collects everything. And lots of, like abstract details, like when they're talking about, Captain Lycurgus here, who's kind of like a great commander for human beings. He goes to save the princess, but he kills a sacred beast to save the princess, and this is like killing a god. Therefore, it kind of puts a blood guilt on the entire nation and leads to everything going wrong. So you can see how like there's the big sword and just like the little eyes. Everything feels like. I want to show every single page because that's how good it is, but I can't do that. So the three sisters are these three very mysterious, kind of like they devoted themselves to like a religious order and a vow of silence, which grants them this really tremendous magical power. And there's just a lot of mystery to like how the magic works, like what you can do with it. But what it really does a good job of is getting you into the swing of things and getting you really invested through the art in these different factions and the kind of primal terror of these things. Now I say it's a dark fantasy because this is rated M. There's like blood and guts and bad things happen. So the reason I defend that is this is a dark fantasy. It's kind of drawing from real history. Like the Assyrians did mean stuff, like they would impale you on a giant spike just to let everybody know you don't mess with the Assyrians. So what's his name, goat general here, General Gorn, he gets tired of the weak king who he thinks has kind of allowed them to be dominated by the human being. So he gets the idea to have a political coup, and he kills all of the king's sons in front of him, and he banishes the king with the limbs of his sons attached to his back. That is a merciless, cruel thing, which has a element of like real cruelty to it. It's cruelty for the sake of dominating your enemies. And I even like how this panel is like one little isolated moment in Gorn's coat, billowing out. And then a page like this where it shows Gorn and like the evil, atrocities he's committing to dominate the human beings, and then it flows down to dark, and then the spirit, the silent sisters are sort of floating here in this beautiful lyrical line. So it's sort of like this is a panel and this is a panel. You see that, but then everything works together as a page. It's amazing. It details like the sisters' task. The queen tells them about like this evil ancient dude who was a magician who sacrificed children but was defeated by like a holy order, and they've got to get his heart. Now, spoiler. From a writing perspective, this is really good writing. There's been very minimal like speech bubbles and dialogue. It's mostly been narration and world building where the art really gives it its impact. And then right at the end, we meet the narrator, and the narrator's name is Meek, and he's from a tiny little like race of scavengers who are being dominated by the Satyrians, like satyrs. They're like goat people. So the Satyrians are whipping him. The three sisters come and meet him, and this is great because after getting absorbed in this world and hearing this narrator speak, we meet the narrator, and he's the tiniest little. It's like the Hobbit. The Hobbit is the smallest little creature in the world, defeating one of the biggest creatures in the world, a giant dragon. It's great. So our narrator is this tiny little creature. The other characters are like these big, powerful races and these tremendous, like magical, mysterious women. And he does like all the good stuff. Like he gives you the map so you can follow where everything is and kind of keep all that clear. He gives you a recap on the characters and what their deal is, and here are the factions. The Holy Knights don't exist anymore, but they were involved in a whole war with an archdemon. So it's sort of like hearing about Morgoth in Lord of the Rings while they're all worried about Sauron, who is just a servant of Morgoth. It's great, rich stuff. Part 2 continues that and shows kind of like the sisters' power. There's this great narrative thing where, yes, they're very powerful, but they're mortal, they're killable, they're not like completely dominant in their abilities. So I want to talk about this page here because this is just such a unique thing that Robert Geronimo is doing that I haven't seen people do that often. He likes to use every little inch of the page and combine small things with big things. So this is like a mini panel of the sister, pierced with arrows, standing up, struggling. You can sort of see the wobble in her step towards a big step panel of her filling the panel, kind of using her magic. It's like a banshee power where they use like this unholy scream to, tear apart their enemies. So there's contrast, little, big, in your face. It isolates her up here and makes her feel more alone, makes her feel... I just love I love having this little detail on top of a page becoming its own panel. That's a unique thing with composition that I don't think I've seen something quite like that before. Geronimo is doing a good job of using his panels cleverly without it being like meta. Oh, look, my panels are upside down and backwards. Isn't that interesting how I'm doing weird panels? He's just using panels to make big, exciting pages that are fun to look at and read through, and you just get invested in it because it's so scary. And he's doing, in a page like this, he's using lettering to do this like big that feels like it's coming from her. It's not a cheap little Photoshop effect. Detail. Good work, Geronimo. You absolutely loved your craft. You respected your craft. You respected the reader. You made something that even a person like me, where I don't like this genre of dark fantasy, I got into it. It was so good. Blood Realm is just more of the same, so I can't wait to finish Dark Covenant and then find the rest of Shadowed Kingdom, which I like this because it gives us a different perspective. I highlighted this page because this is a good illustration of his use of texture in his shadow, where it's spiraling out, so you kind of feel it, like you can fall into there. And then this texture is going across the back of his cloak, so you feel the texture of his cloak, and it's completely different from this, and a thick black outline and a white outline, so you can mentally separate everything. I can't tell if there's a little like offset color here where this is a print error, but I even liked this sort of white halo effect around everything because it gave it this sort of embossed feeling, like looking at a print where you can see the rise and fall of the paper from the printmaking process. And I don't know, this is exactly what comics is supposed to be. The visual image is conveying exactly what the narrative is supposed to convey, and it's kind of conveying that this pit is like this, unearthly, thing that is just this infinite darkness, and they feel it. They kind of feel like the evil energy coming from it, and you can feel it in the drawing. Perfect comics. Do not miss Blood Realm. The two series are Dark Covenant, parts 1, 2, and 3, Shadow Kingdom, parts 1, 2, and 3. Robert Geronimo is going places. Robert Geronimo is going places. That's it. Number one Marmaduke fan. I'm not going to review Lilith Dark until I get the rest of the series, but I just thought it was really sweet at the end where Charles C. Dowd showed like all the kids' drawings for it and printed letters from kids where Lilith Dark was their first comic. So it was a fun, cute little, kid adventure. It very kid-friendly in contrast to Blood Realm, just to give you a break from the darkness. So I'm going to try to track down the rest of Lilith Dark to review that. Go get you some Blood Realm. You will not regret it. Totally metal. Number one Metal Duke fan here. Love you guys. Like, comment, and subscribe. Check out my subscribe star. And catch you later.